Well, my name is Bill Frawley, and I'm going to take you through 100 years of, no, I'm just kidding. I'm going to take you through, yeah, thank you very much for catching that. Some of y'all are, okay. I'm going to talk to you about the impacts of raised medians, specifically out of the Access Management Toolbox, on the economy and adjacent businesses. And so I'm going to start off by saying everything that you, if you're involved in raised median or other access management type projects in Texas, everything you encounter as far as business owners and the public being concerned happens, of course, everywhere in other states. And so when we started doing some of our research years back on access management and specifically raised medians, we looked around in Florida, Iowa, Kansas, and some other parts of Texas had also done some studies and basically found that there were no significant economic impacts after raised medians especially were installed. And I'm going to go through and tell you about that. So what we did, we looked at some raised median corridors in Texas. We interviewed business owners and managers in several cities, and then we also studied where raised medians had been removed, because while we were trying to find out what would happen when raised medians were installed, we thought, well, what happens if you take one out? Does everything get magically better and all the businesses flourish even more? So we looked at a couple of corridors where that had happened. And then, because we did this as an in-person interview process in terms of surveying business owners and managers, we had a 60% participation rate. And that took a lot of effort to do a lot of contacting of businesses along these corridors, but it also involved getting chambers of commerce and other city officials involved, kind of telling the people along the corridors, hey, please participate when they come calling and knocking on the door, so to speak, and that helped a lot. We also surveyed customers on some corridors to find out what did they think, what were their practices, what did they do before and after raised medians were involved. Of course, we interviewed business owners and managers, and then we looked at some actual revenues. You know, in Texas, you can't get individual sales receipts from stores, but you can get revenues from the comptroller's office, but you can go to some of the businesses, and some would provide actual numbers. Here's what we made in this year, the next year, the following year. Some would just tell us what percent up or down they experienced in different years. So we normalized or made all that just come out to be percent changes in business revenues for each of the different years, before, during the installation process, and then afterwards. And then we also looked at customer decisions, again, based on those survey customers, or surveying the customers. What we found, and this is probably no big surprise to any of you who are involved in transportation projects, but the construction phase is often the most critical time in terms of impacts on the businesses. And again, it's also relative to the construction intensity. You know, how long is the corridor? How much of the corridor is kind of torn up, if you will, at a time? Are we redeveloping the roadway in addition to installing a raised median? Or are we just kind of going down a 7-lane section and putting in a raised median where there was a 2-way left turn lane? So it kind of depends on the intensity and the duration of the construction. What we also found is that specialty retail, fast food, sit-down restaurants, sales were generally up after the construction of the raised median. We don't say it's because of the raised median, but we might even say in spite of the raised median. And typically what we had found was their sales numbers at those businesses followed what was going on in the general economy in that area. Now, one thing we did find, even though it was a small sample size, is that auto repair sales businesses along those corridors tended to go down after the construction. Now, what we would say is, well, that's because it's safer now and there's fewer cars getting crashed, but they don't buy into that. But that was the one type, yeah, that was a joke too. So that was one of the things that we did find as far as a business type that typically went down. So some more of the findings in Texas throughout the different corridors, really the regular customers who had built up a loyalty to certain businesses, there wasn't a negative impact, either during construction, especially afterwards. They found a way, even if they had to go down and make a U-turn or do something like that, they found a way to get back to those businesses that they had built up a loyalty to. And of course, no significant economic impacts on individual businesses overall. Of course, some did, and we'll talk about that. But in general, especially along the corridors. So, and then there's a lot of other factors that would play into whether some businesses survived or not. And this is information we received by talking in person to these business owners and managers. A lot of times it's what's the national or even the local economy doing? If there's a recession, well, all the businesses are going to go down. Well, did that happen at the same time the median was installed? And so you have to kind of look at what were the other factors. Also, business management. We found some cases where, say, mom and pop, so to speak, after retiring from their jobs, hey, let's open a pet store, or let's open this other type of a store that we've always dreamed of doing. And unfortunately, mom and pop didn't know that much about running a business, and it went down even before, during, or after that raised median was installed. Then also we found out from some of the chain type stores and restaurants, a lot of things have to do with national and regional marketing that they participate in, but advertising and specials. And when you see like Red Lobster has endless shrimp, well, you're gonna get a lot of people in there for Red Lobster during those months, but then other times not so much. So one of the things that we did, that we took a study that was done, I believe it was in Nebraska the first time, but we said, let's find out if you were to rank these criteria that customers think about when they're deciding which business am I going to, which restaurant, which store, so on. So we asked the customers, would you rank these, and we asked the business owners and managers, would you rank these in the order that you think it's important to the customer to consider? So you see customer service, product quality, product price, accessibility to the store, how far do I have to travel, and how early and late are they open. So the business owners' comments, as we kind of sifted through it all, the summaries were, they desire more input regarding access options. They desire faster and smaller construction phases so that their part of their street, their access is interrupted less. They want to increase communications and alleviate misconceptions. That kind of plays into, especially one of the extreme cases we heard of that was in one of the cities where we were talking about a raised median that was going to be coming before it all. It was a motel, and they brought in not just the manager of that motel, but a regional manager and a state level person and a chain person. We had about 6 or 7 people in this room, and when we started talking about what we were doing, they had the idea that this was going to be a multi-level interchange built that would hide their motel. When we told them, no, this is just a raised median, curb and gutter basically down the middle of the road, well, they kind of relaxed and were okay with it. So sometimes the wrong word, not necessarily from TxDOT or the city or the county, but just through that grapevine in the community, the wrong word can get out. So it's important to manage that message that gets out. And then the usefulness of the access restrictions in terms of where are the median openings, how long are the storage bays, and so on. And then also concerned about future access and diversions to side streets. So that summarizes a lot of the business owner comments. Some of the customer comments were that, well, the majority of us are about likely to, at least the same likeliness to return back to the businesses we were going to. Now, some of this is what I would call a reading from the book of Duh that I hope to write someday. But gas stations and fast foods, they're less likely to have someone make a circuitous route to get back to them. You know, gas stations pretty much always have the price up there. Well, if it's the same price on this side of the street as that side, and I'm in a hurry, I'm going to make my ride in and ride out. I'm not going to loop around just to get back to a certain station. Fast food, unless you have the little kids in the car, it probably doesn't matter if you're getting a Happy Meal or whatever else. You go in and get through the drive-thru and get out and get on your way. But the customer said accessibility is less important than those other issues that I mentioned in that previous slide. In fact, it came out fourth after product quality, customer service, and the price. Those are things that the businesses themselves can control. This diagram is an old one that probably people have seen in textbooks and other presentations and discussions, but it basically is here to show you that if you have a business located in the center of this area, and you see what those speed limits or the driving times are, if you have roadways that have more free flow traffic, say up to 45 miles per hour, that solid kind of blob line, well, that's where you can have your market reach for your business. But if we kind of clog up the streets and we slow down traffic by having a lot of driveway openings and intersections and not turn lanes, a lot of these things that access management can solve, well, now your market only reaches out further for that same travel time because people are only averaging 30 miles an hour on the road. So the more things you can do to improve traffic flow, including a lot of the access management techniques, of which some are raised medians, and you can improve the market reach for a business without changing anything else. So economic effects, access management techniques in general are not directly related to retail sales. That's going to happen based on the economy and how successful that business can be and so on. And that's from 4 different states. Here's a quote out of the Shopping Center Development Handbook done by the Urban Land Institute that says, poorly designed access treatments can present traffic hazards and congestion that create a negative image of a center. So thinking about that for just a moment, if you need to close your eyes, but don't fall asleep, but if you want to picture wherever home is for you, and think about the shopping centers and the businesses that you go in and out of, do you feel safer going into the ones that have well-defined access points, or maybe even left turns are limited in and out because you only have to worry about turning against or with one direction of traffic? Or do you like the ones where there's multiple driveway openings and you have to guess where you and even the other traffic are going, or even some of those what we might call the open curb cuts where people can come and go freely? A lot of us, I think, might not even recognize or think about it consciously, but we like the ones that are well designed, and we feel better about going there. And now that I have a 17-year-old son, I like him going to the safer type of establishments as well in terms of driving. There's a primer and video out there that Federal Highways did some time ago, but it's still very good. It's very useful, called Safe Access is Good for Business. That's a good resource to try to look up and find if you want something to try to help sell your message to the community. So, in the cases where some businesses have closed, well, here's the question: what's behind those closed doors? What's the reason for it? Well, sometimes, again, national chains, they make certain decisions, and sometimes they decrease their advertising or their specials, and sometimes they actually make decisions we're pulling out of a region or part of the country or part of the state. Franchise fees, marketing, all types of things. And then again, like I said before, with the mom and pop or local top businesses, do they have the experience and the know-how to actually do it? Do they have the capital to make it through those rough phases, especially when sometimes it's the startup or even the construction phases that can decrease traffic through an area? Sometimes it's aging infrastructure. Someone goes into an older retail shopping center and it's on its last legs, and so people don't go there because it's not as aesthetically pleasing, or again, doesn't have the type of access that's attractive. Sometimes there's things that are on the, quote, wrong side of the street, okay? So if there's a roadway before the raised median comes along and there's a donut shop on the, if you will, outbound side of the street between the suburbs and downtown, well, it's not too bad to make a left turn in and out sometimes to get that box of donuts on the way to the office, so you're not the person that was late, you're the person that brought donuts, which is always a good thing, or the mid-block gas stations. But when that raised median comes along, you might not be as likely to make that circuitous route unless it is the best donuts in town. You'll probably go down further along and find one on your side of the street. So those are the types of things that can have an impact. Again, competition, other stores, other chains that come locating nearby. Barnes & Nobles might be affected when Books A Million or some other store comes along and competes in that corridor. And then what I've called the cannibalism, the same chain comes into the region. In other words, we found this on a street in Arlington, Cooper Street. There was Target and Best Buy and all these different stores. Well, about 5 or 6 miles further south, in Mansfield, it was growing and it started developing and it got its own Target and its own Best Buy and all these things. And so for a while, you might say, wow, when they put the raised median in on Cooper Street, their sales all went down. But it's not because of that so much as people weren't driving up from Mansfield to support those stores anymore. And that thing has a way of evening itself out. Speaking of cannibalism, do you know what the last cannibal to the banquet gets? The cold shoulder. Okay. Right. So remember why you are implementing see, some of y'all are still awake. That's good. Remember why you're implementing access management in the first place. When people come along and say, hey, you're going to shut down my business, you're going to ruin the economy, say, well, we're not, and we can tell you about that, but primarily we're doing this for safety. We're reducing crashes, we're reducing fatalities or the opportunities for those, and serious injuries. And sometimes the challenge is you might have a corridor where there hasn't been a high fatality or incapacitating injury rate yet, but it's poised for that because of the cross-section and the volumes and the developments coming along. We're also doing it to improve mobility, to improve driver expectations. Instead of having 30 driveways, or instead of this open two-way left turn lane where people can come and go anywhere, now we've got well-defined access points, and it gives a better idea of what can I expect from the other drivers, including myself, and of course less stop and go traffic, slowing down, speeding back up. So my conclusions and our conclusions from the research that we did, I want to make sure that Bill Isley, who is also with TTI, gets a good plug. He and I work cooperatively and together on these things, but no general direct ties between access management and business success or failure. Some businesses are more vulnerable than others, and there's a variety of reasons that any businesses will succeed or fail. And then there's issues that the businesses can control: product quality, price, hours of operation, those things that are more important to the customers than where's the driveway, or do I have to make a U-turn to get to that store that I've built up a loyalty to. So customers are typically pretty loyal. Speaking of that, construction period is typically the hardest on the businesses. Clear communications are very vital to make sure everyone knows what is coming down the road, no pun intended. And then performing studies can be very challenging depending on the type of information and data that you're able to get in the cooperation. And with that, and I'll ask Andy, do we have time for a question? Okay. So, if someone has a hand up, there we go. Go ahead and just yell it out since you probably can't get to a microphone.
I can try to dial a little bit while he's working the microphone. Is this going to be incorporated into perhaps a new access management manual refit, revising?
That I would have to leave up to someone at TxDOT to say if they're going to be revising that anytime in the future. We have some of these materials that are out there and available, so if there's someone from a district, there have been some research projects in the past, implementation projects that have some materials like these and others that can help in the public outreach, but also with knowing what to expect. So working through probably design division would be the first step, and then looking at some of the research projects. I hope that at least sort of answers the question.
Some of those slides that you had are in the manual already. We have general discussion on it. So it's partially in there. I'll have to look at it. We can look at it and improve it. But it is in there already.
So the original question, I'm sorry, was, will any of this information, these slides, be incorporated into the access management manual or revisions in the future? And then if you couldn't hear the response from the person on the very back row, they said some of these materials and slides are already in that manual and are being used in addition to those outreach presentations that are available that I mentioned. I'm trying to see if there's anyone else. And if someone is and I don't see you, just shout out or throw something.
What's the history of right-of-way sorry, we had a landowner who wanted to be compensated for his loss of access. Is that something that has happened, or
It's a case-by-case basis. The question was, what happens if someone wants to be compensated for their loss of at least even some type of access, whether it was left in, left out, or something like that? And the answer is that's a case-by-case basis, and there are some values put upon that at times.
what is the, I guess what are the basic criteria why we would grant left turn access, why we wouldn't grant left turn access or compensation for left turn access, or not compensation?
So I believe the question is, why would we or would we not compensate for the loss of left turn access? It all has to do on circuity, and that's where it can vary even among states, the value that's placed. Well, if I have to go a quarter of a mile out of my way making U-turns or a more circuitous route, then is there really an impact, as opposed to, like in Colorado, we found some examples where a gas station that was halfway between two median openings that were half a mile apart either way from that, they said, yeah, that's going to pretty much ruin that gas station, at least half their previous business. That was a Colorado decision on that one, but I'd have to leave even more of the details to attorneys that can start talking about those. But yeah, it's a case-by-case basis.